Hello, welcome to another Adventures in Bing Chat. So previously on Bing Chat, the last episode I was asking it about the potential benefits of studying concepts of programming languages versus just studying a programming language or learning a programming language. And one particular rabbit hole I started to go down is this idea, which originally I think it comes from Wittgenstein, which is the limits of our language are the limits of our world idea. And I'd seen that mentioned within the domain of programming languages as well. So I thought it'd be an interesting thing to explore in Bing Chat. So I'm going to start off with this question. So do you believe our capacity for abstract thought is influenced by our language skills? And here I'm just using the term language skills. I'm not saying programming languages. After a little bit of discussion about language and skills, I'm going to move over to the application to programming languages in terms of abstract thought and see where we go with this. So again, it's this idea of starting in one domain where you might be able to apply or abstract or draw some sort of parallel observations in another domain. I've asked it to support its opinion as well. So it tells me it's a very interesting question. There's no definitive answer to whether our capacity for abstract thought is influenced by language skills, but there are some theories and evidence to suggest a possible relationship. One theory is that language and abstract thinking are both products of the same cognitive system, which is called the symbolic system. This system allows us to use symbols such as words, numbers, images and gestures to represent and manipulate concepts that are not directly observable. According to this theory, language and abstract thinking are interdependent and mutually reinforcing. Language helps us to communicate and organise our abstract thoughts, while abstract thinking helps us to create and understand new meanings and expressions in language. Another theory is that language and abstract thinking are separate but related cognitive abilities, which are influenced by different factors. This theory suggests that language skills depend more on the environmental input, such as exposure to different languages and cultures, while abstract thinking skills depend more on the biological maturation, such as brain development and genetic factors. According to this theory, language and abstract thinking can influence each other, but they are not necessarily dependent on each other. There is some empirical evidence that supports both theories. For example, some studies have found that bilingualism can enhance abstract thinking skills, while other studies have found that abstract reasoning skills can improve language skills. However, there are also many individual differences and confounding variables to make it difficult to draw causal conclusions from these findings. Therefore, the question of whether our capacity for abstract thought is influenced by our language skills is still open for further research and debate. It is possible that there is no single answer, but rather a complex interaction of multiple factors that affect both language and abstract thinking in different ways. So, what is the symbolic system? First, the organised collection of symbols and rules for their use that people recognise and understand to carry certain meanings. It's more about the structure and established conventions governing the use of symbols. Now here, be careful that you understand exactly what symbol means in this context. So symbols can be anything that can represent and manipulate concepts that are not directly observable, such as words, numbers, images and gestures. For example, the word cat is a symbol that represents a certain type of animal, and the number 2 is a symbol that represents a certain quantity. So that's how the word symbol is used here. The rules for using symbols are the conventions that determine how symbols can be combined, interpreted and transformed. For example, the rules of grammar determine how words can be arranged into sentences, and the rules of arithmetic determine how numbers can be added, subtracted, multiplied or divided. Different symbolic structures have different purposes and applications. Some researchers in artificial intelligence have proposed that language and abstract thinking are both products of the same symbolic system in the human mind. Other researchers have suggested that language and abstract thinking are separate but related cognitive abilities which are influenced by different factors. So it's sort of echoing some of what it's said up here further down, and open to research and debate. So can animals use symbolic systems? And how would you find out, I suppose? According to the definition, some animals such as chimpanzees, dolphins and parrots have been shown to use symbolic systems in experimental settings. For example, some chimpanzees have learned to use sign languages or lexicograms, symbols on a keyboard, to communicate with humans and other chimpanzees. Some dolphins have learned to associate whistles with objects and actions. Some parrots have learned to use words and phrases to label and request items. I did see that example of that dog they trained to retrieve named sort of stuffy toys. I don't know if anybody's seen that on YouTube. It's pretty interesting actually. And there's a point at which they ask I can't remember which way around it is, I'd have to watch it again, but there's some bit where they deliberately ask the dog to retrieve a stuffy toy it doesn't have. Something like that, yeah. And it's interesting to see what it does, but I can't remember the exact connotation now. It just sprung to my mind when I thought about it. If I wasn't doing this live, I would have dug out the video. I've gone off down a bit of a side rabbit hole here because it looks really interesting actually. That's something I've often thought about. Yes, I imagine that's quite difficult to prove. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Well, I do know animals can use tools. So let me just try this. I may have sort of, because I've gone off track a little bit. Well, we'll see how this works. So I'm just asking, how might what you've mentioned in the discussion above be applicable to programming languages? Now, clearly animals can't program. So we'll see what happens here. So it's locked in on programming languages and abstract thinking. Yeah, so it's interesting now that it has locked in. Again, I tend to use this term stickiness. Just for want of a better word. I think the other day I used, something like attention bias. So it's now locking into an interest in programming languages. Programming languages are a form of symbolic systems that enable us to create and manipulate abstract concepts in the domain of computer science. They are applicable to the discussion above in several ways. Programming languages help us to develop and enhance our abstract thinking skills, as we need to use symbols such as words, numbers, images and gestures to represent and manipulate concepts that are not directly observable, such as algorithms, data structures, functions and objects. Programming languages also require us to use abstraction, which is a process of simplifying complex systems by breaking them down into more manageable levels. Abstraction allows us to hide the complicated details of a lower level, like how a computer processes binary code, while focusing on a higher level of problem solving, like creating a user-friendly app. Programming languages also demand logical thinking from programmers, as each language has its unique structure and syntax that determines how symbols can be combined, interpreted and transformed. Logical thinking helps us to reason about abstract concepts and solve problems in a systematic and consistent way. Therefore, programming languages are closely related to abstract thinking, as they both involve using symbols and rules to create and understand complex systems. Programming languages can also help us to improve our abstract thinking skills, as they challenge us to think creatively and analytically about non-physical concepts. So I could say, how do you feel that this lines up with the quote, the limits of my language are the limits, probably paraphrasing here, limits of my world. So let's see what it comes up with. Yep, so it's a Wittgenstein attribution. So it seems to be, coming back with the interpretations of that quote first of all. It's funny in data science, what do they talk about? Data wrangling. It's funny. I'm getting now the impression, now I've been using Bing Chat for quite a while now, this is like prompt wrangling. not so much prompt engineering, more prompt wrangling. Yeah, it seems to want to riff around this symbolic systems and abstraction. Still, yeah, it's still looking into programming languages and abstract thinking. It's not really so much, maybe I'm missing something here, it's not so much reflecting on some of these other things, or at least having a an opinion on it, if again that's the right words to use here. Doesn't want to, what's the word, doesn't want to synergize the two really, does it? What do you think about the possibility that can you discuss this in the Okay, I think we're getting there. Yeah, okay, this is more like it. So this is what I was aiming for. So, yeah. Okay, bit of wrangling here. Okay, yeah, that's much better. So I got there, trying to mash it together. And of course doing stuff like this, here I'm doing it stepwise, slowly trying, obviously probably didn't help me going off on a bit of a tangent about abstract thinking animals, but anyway. But what that might do is give me insight into how to basically create a better prompt if I was wanting it to do in a single prompt. But as you know, I do quite like this backwards and forwards. But so it really came together when I gave it a specific idea, if you like, and then fed that in beyond just saying, how might this apply, this whole thing, to programming languages. And it pretty much just came with a general, and I did that. And then when I went into a bit more detail, I suppose. And you can, the thing I think I've said this before, it was always keep an eye on this, because this often gives you a bit of a clue as to where it's going. I know there's a lot of stuff we can't see under the bonnet, but it does give you a bit of a heads up as to where things might be going wrong. And then one other thing to do, which I'm sure you've seen me do this before, is if I copy this and then just get it to forget everything. I'm not really interested in keeping any of that. And then try feeding it back. So we're starting here completely fresh. You see, this isn't a lot of... I'm just wondering. It's just regurgitating facts, and it's not really synthesizing them. You know, I don't know if anybody else gets that impression when they do like these multi-part questions where they're saying take this and then consider it under this particular domain, or other discipline. I always used to find it was a lot better at this originally. Often it seems to work through what it understands by the first bit, what it understands by the second bit, and I don't know whether it's glued the two together there or whether it's just being artfully vague. I suppose, yeah, it's a bit loosey-goosey to me. So, well, yeah, maybe I'm being unfair. That's fine. You need to learn a bit more about this. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Sounds like something out of Star Trek. Oh, here we go. That looks like an interesting article. I'll include that. Yeah, that's an interesting find. So that's pretty cool, actually. After all of that, even though in terms of mashing together things, it wasn't quite what I was looking for. Though it was, I suppose, it was fairly broad. Maybe I was looking for something a little bit more philosophical, that's the trouble. But yeah, I'll include a link to this article if anybody's interested in reading it in the description. Okay, so thanks once again for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed that little trip down the Bing Chat rabbit hole, just to see the sort of things you can experiment with. Thanks for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in the next episode.